Jeff giving a hand here, Jeff Solberg. I'm here in my garage gym, the Pain Cave, Jeff's gym. I want to take a minute and tell my story about how I became a three-finger amputee and how that day, a lot of people will question me when I say that it turned out to be the best day of my life. It changed my life completely. I have to deal with prosthetics now and adapting to just about everything in my life. But let's go back to the beginning. I work for an oil refinery in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm on the maintenance machinist side of things, and with that being said, we are required to wear PPE, personal protective equipment, which is steel-toed boots, FR, fire retardant clothing, gloves, hard hat, safety glasses, all of that type of stuff. And so the date's July 6th, 2016. I'm on top of the world. I've been remarried for 6 months now, and a couple weeks before that, we went on our honeymoon. My wife, not being the winter person like me, we decided to wait till early summer to go on our honeymoon. And so we spent a week up in Sun Valley, Idaho, enjoying the sights, seeing the mountains, and just having a good time. Well, I get back to work, and I'm tasked today with doing a pump, pulling it out, tearing it apart, repairing all that needs to be repaired on it, and putting it back in to the hole, so to speak, and starting it up again. So me and the guy working with me, we take and pull the pump, we tear it apart, and I am repairing the pump shaft, which is consisting of polishing some fits on it. And with that being said, what I'm doing is polishing it with what's called emery paper. And I kind of do what they call shoe shining. I'm sitting there polishing up these areas, and as I'm going back and forth, my glove takes and it gets too close to the shaft and gets caught between the emery and the pump shaft. And the type of gloves I have on were cut resistant, and they took and grabbed, and it pulled my hand into the shaft. The shaft is spinning at about 600 RPMs, and instantly I knew I had a problem. And the picture in my head was those shop class videos of a person getting pulled into a piece of equipment and it going up their arm, possibly killing them. Well, it pulls my hand in, and it actually is wrapping around backwards and gets up to my wrist. And at that point in time, I use every bit of effort that I have to pull back and out of the lathe. And when I step back, I have a fountain of blood coming out of the end of my hand. And things start going hyper fast, but in slow motion at the same time. I take and I apply pressure to stop the bleeding. I'm on the ski patrol. I've been on it for several years at some big name resorts here in Utah, and I gotta stop the blood. I'm holding it. I start surveying what's going on and everything. I step up to the lathe and turn it off. I step back. I call to one of my co-workers, tell him to call rescue on the radio. I need help. And I take and I pull my hand back again, and I see two big, bright, white chicken bones that looked like bloody sticking out of the end of my hand, and it's surreal, but not. At that point in time, everything's kicking into the fight or flight mode, and I know I got a major problem here, and I need to get help as soon as possible. Well, rescues other guys working, doing their task, and depending upon where they are at the refinery, they might be 5 or 10 minutes away from me. I sit down, my co-worker comes up, asks to see, I show him, and realizing we have an on-site clinic there at the refinery, and I'm about 100 yards from that clinic. I take and tell him to walk with me. I don't know if I know walk into the clinic, but the one thing that I do know is each step I take is a step closer to help. And so we start walking. And it was interesting as when I was looking at my hands, I knew things were missing. It didn't all register. I was in shock, yes, but being on the ski patrol, I was also in charge of staying calm. And I'll be honest, I was saying some real choice words at the moment because my pain level was literally through the roof. You know, I sat there and looked at my hand, turning it back and forth, looking at the missing things, but I somewhat thought they were still there. Well, we walked into the clinic, and the nurse, she caught her off guard. She hauls me over to the sink and starts trying to wash things off and clean things up. You know, you gotta have clean wounds. And I look at her and I tell her, there's nothing you're gonna do with this. You need to get every bit of gauze you got in this room and start packing and wrapping. We need to stop the blood flow. And so she starts wrapping my hand and just keep wrapping until the blood quits soaking through. And about that time, a few people start showing up there at the clinic. And I'm sitting there. One individual comes in and he has my fingers on ice in a bag and sets them on the counter and tells everyone, here they are, if they can put them back on, do. I turn around and the first person I see is our refinery manager, and she's sitting there. She looks me in the eyes and she's crying. And I tell the nurse, I go, I need some oxygen. I need to sit down. I need some oxygen. And so they take me to a table and sit me down, put the oxygen on me, and we hear over the radio that paramedics and ambulance are at the gate. We're sitting there, and my supervisor comes in, and he kind of makes the statement that all he had to do is follow the blood trail to the clinic to know where I was. But back to point in time, he looks at me and asks me who I want him to call. And I reach in my pocket and I hand him my phone and tell him, call Holly, my wife. So he calls her and tells her who he is and that I just had an accident and they're taking me to the hospital. I will never not cry at this point in time. I can tell my story. I can tell it with a lot of depth and feeling, but there are a few points in it that I never want to change. Because when he's talking to her on the phone, I am sitting there trying to figure out, newly married, husband, father, breadwinner, what does my life look like going forward? Paramedics come in and they take and cut my coveralls off me, hook up some monitors, and put me on the stretcher and wheel me to the ambulance and load me up as quick as possible. As we're going through the gate, going down the road, I give kudos to the paramedic as he takes and sticks the IV in me, first poke, and gets it going and gives me a shot of morphine. And as we're driving to the hospital, I hand him my phone and ask him to call my oldest son and let him know about things. Well, he calls him and gets voicemail, leaves a message saying they're taking me to the U of U hospital. And so we get up to the hospital and they take me in, and they find me a room, a little chaos at first. There's good points and bad points to going to a trauma 1 hospital. very active place. It's where all the big ones go. And so we're sitting there. Several doctors come in and start surveying things. Not exactly sure. I know they took my fingers with us when we went to the hospital, and when we got there, they put them on the counter. Doctors took and unwrapped things and kind of look at things. They take and look at my fingers in the bag, and it was quite the sight because there was all this stringy stuff attached to the fingers, and when it pulled my fingers off, it pulled the tendons clear from my elbow. Well, they start evaluating things, start making phone calls and checking into things. Wife shows up. My son shows up. My mother shows up. I told ex-wife to take her home, But so I got to the hospital about 3:30 in the afternoon, and it was almost 11:30 at night when I went into surgery. Mine was serious, but the heart attacks, and there were other things that were more serious than mine. They weren't going to sew my fingers back on. That wasn't an option. The fact that it took the tendons clear from my elbow. So I get into surgery, and my hand was busted up really bad. There was only one broken bone, but it was like I had taken and stuck my hand in a blender. It had ripped and tore everything up and loose in my hand. And because of all the damage, so when the initial accident took my index finger at the MP knuckle joint off completely. My middle finger was one joint out, but what they call degloved. It pulled skin clear from the knuckle, and all the tendons and everything went with it. That was the white chicken bone I was seeing. My ring finger was one joint further out, and same thing, pulled, degloved. There was bits of skin hanging on here and there. So doctors are taught to try and save as much as possible. So they took and grafted skin from my hip to cover the bones. And then they took and cut my arm open to try and get, because of all the swelling and everything, they trying to get as much blood flow there to my outer digits to save as much as possible. So I come out of surgery and get up to the room early morning, 5 a.m., something like that. And I'm in the hospital. I spent 5 days in the hospital. I had 2 surgeries, 2 skin grafts, had 10 pins, a plate, half dozen screws holding everything together for about 12 weeks. Wasn't pretty, I remember laying in the hospital, and again, I'm trying to figure out what life's going to be like. So I I listened to a lot of Audible books on tape, so to speak. And a friend had recommended a book the year before. It was called The Long Run, the story of Matt Long, New York firefighter. I think the year was 2005. He's training for Ironman triathlon. I had done two triathlons at that point in time. And he's riding his bike, it's like, I don't know, 23rd of December, New York City. He's riding his bike to the gym to get a workout in before his shift at the firehouse, and a bus runs him over. And over the course of the next 3 days, they put something like 43 units of blood in him by any rights. He should not be alive today. He spent 6 months in the hospital. Came out in a wheelchair, colostomy bad, and year and a half later, he did the New York Marathon. And a year after that, he did the Lake Placid Ironman. Didn't set any records, so to speak, maybe on the adaptive side. But, you know, the Lake Placid Ironman, he finished that race about 10 minutes before they cut off the race. It took him something like 18 hours to finish that race. Well, you know, compared to him, mine was a little boo-boo. I needed to start figuring things out. Started surfing through YouTube and stuff and come across YouTube video. I'd been doing CrossFit for several years. Came across this YouTube video called The Working Wounded Games. All adaptive CrossFit style competition held back in Baltimore, DC area each year. All adaptive individuals. Missing legs, arms, in wheelchairs, competing against each other. And it is the most inspiring, emotional thing I'd ever seen. Watching an individual with no legs put every ounce of effort he has into picking up a sandbag and throwing it up over a pull-up bar. I turn to my wife and tell her, I want to go there. I want to see that. It's totally inspiring. Yeah, I need to figure out what my life is going to be. So, as we go forward, competitive side of me, you can see back on the wall it says Red Bull 400. My doctor, we have a great relationship, but it kind of was rocky and edgy. Let's call it edgy at the time. That night, as they were wheeling me into surgery, I asked him, I go, so am I going to be able to do the Red Bull 400 in September? He takes and looks at me and goes, you just lost half your hand You're concerned about some race? Yeah, doc, I got money on this, Spent money, I want to do this. So 12 weeks later, something like 10 days out of my 5th surgery, I don't have 5 fingers on this hand to show you, I was there competing in the Red Bull 400, and I finished it. First accomplishment. Wasn't easy. I was kind of loopy a little bit, and at one point in time, it was a total bear crawl. I had my arm strapped to my chest, and it's steep. The Red Bull 400's 400 meters up ski jump in Park City, 1,600 vertical feet of change. They got a cargo net that you use to get yourself up. And it was pull with one arm, stand, get my footing, reach, pull with one arm. One point I stood up and I just about went over backwards. My wife was about ready to come over the railing to catch me. So I completed that. And I learned early on that no matter how strong you are, sitting around dealing with pain, I live with pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it hurts. And if you're sitting around, your mind goes to that pain. And that pain starts wanting you to do things that you normally wouldn't think about and stuff. So about 4 weeks after my accident, I got back into the gym. And I'd go to the gym, I couldn't lift or anything, but I could do an exercise bike. So I'd get on the assault bike and I take and pedal, and it started feeling good. But, I got some pretty crazy scars here. When they went to sew my arm back up, it was still swollen so much, so they had to graft more skin from my hip onto my arm. So at that point in time, I have skin grafts on my fingers, skin grafts on my arm, and I'm not a pretty sight, I go for my first bandage change, and they tell me, they're going to take the bandages off and it won't be pretty and stuff. And I go, well, I don't want to see it. You cover my eyes, you change the bandages, you do whatever. And so they take me back in the back of the room and lay me down on this table and put a towel over my head. And they start to change the bandages, and since they release them, all of a sudden I just start screaming, and it's feels like they're slicing up my hand again, only in a different spot. And the nurse is asking, what's going on? And I go, you're cutting my hand, and we're not doing a thing, we're not touching you. I go, it's digging in, it's cutting, I feel something. And when they released tension, a couple of the pins that were holding my hand together were digging into the skin and stuff, and they call the doctor, and they rush me downstairs and rush me into surgery again, and open up my hand and trim the pins back a little bit. Another one of those little surgeries stuff. But we keep going forward. I start going to hand therapy 3 times a week, bandage changes, and we're doing everything possible to try and save my fingers and stuff. And one day decided I needed some new pants, so we go to the store to get me some pants, and I'm in the fitting room, and I go, and for just everyday person, you just kind of rub your hand across the denim Levi's, and because I had nothing but skin over bone, it caused a friction burn, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I look down, and on the floor it's covered in blood. I got a lot of screwed up parts in this hand, feeling wise and all. Didn't feel a thing, but I got blood on the pants everywhere. I try and put the bandage back on, and I go out and tell my wife, well, we're buying this pair, we gotta go get my hand bandaged up. And so I'd get those friction burns and such, and I'd spend 6, 8, 10 weeks trying to get them to heal up. And finally, after about 8 months, I told my surgeon, I go, I can't live this way. I need you to give me a life where I can do something. And so they do, the proper politically correct terminology is a revision. It's taken away, cutting off. And that's what I struggled with early on after my accident, when my surgeon and I would fight about, you need to look at this, you need to accept it. I told him, I accept my accident, I accept my fingers aren't coming back or anything, but I don't want to accept a picture like this and end up with a picture like this. And long about February, that's what it was. I asked him to remove my fingers. And I don't care who you are. It's a very emotional thing to lose a body part. And these were fingers that I'd already lost stuff. That came quick and easy. I had no option there. But I had to make the decision here, and I had to think about it. And it was very emotional. But I had him cut them off. And that was one of the best things. There's a little phrase that goes with yoga a lot of times, less is more. Well, in that case, that was very true. Less was more. It gave me more. There were struggles throughout that whole period of time. Early on, when I was going to the gym, I wasn't a pretty sight, so I always was hiding my arm, my hand, protecting you from seeing the damage I had, the scariness of it. And I had a friend at the gym that, after I'd been there a couple of weeks, she came up to me one day. She asked me, she goes, can I see it? And I kind of prepped her. I go, it's not a pretty sight. A lot of damage there. And I took and showed her. And she looks at me and she goes, It's not as bad as what I thought it was going to be. And at that point in time, she ripped down that curtain, that wall that I was using to protect everyone from seeing me and my damage. I thank her to this day for giving me back my life in that sense. So we go forward. We take and I heal up. I do another Red Bull 400 next year. I'm getting a year older each year. This initial accident, I was 53 years old. Today I'm 57 years old. And I beat my time from the previous year. Then the Working Wounded Games comes up. And I go. I'm there. I'm competing there. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever been to. You know, the energy when you walked into the building was like nothing you've ever seen. I have a cousin that lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and her husband came up to watch me, and that was the first words out of their mouth when they walked in. They go, "The energy in this place is amazing." So go through that day competing and stuff, and I'm just amazed meeting all these new people, learning their stories and everything. And I'm a little kid in a candy store, videotaping stuff, taking pictures, and awards time comes about. And they're giving out the awards in the skilled area. And Sarah comes to the upper extremities and she's giving out awards, and she goes in second place is Jeff Solberg. And I'm just sitting there videotaping away. Then she kind of leans over and looks me in the eye and she goes, "And in second place is Jeff Solberg." And I take, whoa, holy heck, that's me. I take and hand the video camera to my wife and run up, get my little basket of goodies, so to speak. And go back, sit down, amazing experience. Met some amazing people there. True friends. We have bonded in such amazing ways and stuff. Several of them that I can call on a heartbeat and say, "Hey, I need some help," and they'll drop everything. Come see me. Come help me. You know, usually it's some type of activity. We do some crazy stuff. Then going a little forward, year later, I get a rowing machine. I like rowing. There's a company out there, Concept 2 rowing machines. And I get a rowing machine and I'm rowing and such. And I come across they track records, indoor rowing records and stuff. And they have an adaptive division and stuff. And so I start checking it out, and it's sitting there looking at them, and I reach out to them and tell them what happened to me and where I am, and they tell me I qualify for 2 divisions. First off, I qualify for just physically disabled, and then because I'm missing 60% of my hand, I also qualify as single arm as long as I don't use this hand. Well, I decided, early on, I had talked to an individual, and he told me, with my condition, I need to try and do as much as I can with this hand. Because when you do everything one-handed, you start throwing things off. And it's so wild. The body is so amazing and interesting in the sense, I don't know for sure, but I figure I lost like a pound of weight in my accident. But my center line of balance on my body has shifted over because of that. So things are off a little bit. I don't fall to the ground as easy as I used to be able to before my accident and stuff. But back to throwing, I look and at that time there was a lot of CrossFit doing this marathon row, and one of the records in the Concept 2 was a half marathon. So I reach out to him and I tell him, hey, I want to do half marathon row. I go, okay. You have to be an hour, 35 minutes, and a few seconds. Said Matt Long set that record just 2 weeks ago. Haven't had a chance to post it yet. I go, Matt Long. Shoot, that guy's my idol. He got me through the hospital. I sit there for about a week, hee-hawing around, I can't take my idol, knock him off. I'm sitting there contemplating everything, tracking things, figuring everything out, and after a couple of days I go, he's a competitor. If it was me sitting there, he'd try and knock me off. You gotta do this. So I take that morning and I get up and I hee-haw around a little bit. Wife comes out, she goes, you gonna do this? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I take and I hop on the rowing machine and I start and I take off and I start pushing, and it's tough. Half marathon row is 21,097 meters, and I pushed through and I beat Matt Long. I knocked him off. I got an hour, 28 minutes and 56 seconds, I think it was. On top of the world. It sucked. It was a sucky thing. But I'm living life. I take, and a year after that, Spartan obstacle races come out, and they want to do a para-Spartan. Adaptive individuals, 4-person teams, competing against each other in Laughlin, Nevada. Sure, I'm in. I do crazy things, but I'm living life. And, throughout this whole struggle, I'm a little over 4 years into it now. We all are in different places. We all have different journeys. We're all hurting differently. But I've learned, at first I had to go out and prove what I could do before. Now I sit back and my goal in life is to help people. Because we have two choices in life. You can sit on the couch and shrivel up to nothing, or you can get out and live life. My parents were great examples for me. My dad hurt all his life, had his knees, he needed knee replacement, and he put it off till he retired. He had both knees replaced in a year. And after that, he'd go to the gym and he'd walk every day on a treadmill for several hours. And he got in the best shape of my life. He'd walk me into the ground. My mother, she started falling. And she would go into rehab and she'd come home and she'd hurt and she'd sit on the couch and she'd say, I'm just going to sit here until it quits hurting. And we couldn't convince her. It's never going to quit hurting. And I sat there and watched her over a period of 15 years shrivel up to nothing, getting weaker every single day until she could hardly stand up. She kept falling when she'd stand up and hurt herself. And ultimately, a fall is what did her in. She ended up in the hospital, and 3 days later, she died. With them being my example, I'm getting up every day and living life. And I hope that I can be an example for you and everyone else out there, whether you're adaptive or not. They have a saying out there, the body's designed to move, and mobility is the secret of that. Get off the couch. Get out. You don't have to do crazy stuff like me. I must have hit my head at some point in time, but get out. Go for a walk. I'm learning a lot through this journey and stuff, and walking is really good. It doesn't abuse your body as much as I do, I lift weights and but I'm also the strongest I've been in my lifetime. And with that being said, I created my own foundation. Jeff giving a hand, I gave a hand, now I give a hand. Our goal is to help adaptive individuals through health, fitness, and nutrition get out, live life, go biking, hiking, kayaking, whatever it be, but eat right. One of the major amputee slices of the pie is medical amputation, diabetes, and it's type 2 diabetes. It's reversible through fitness and nutrition. Get off the couch. Live life. To this day, I am living in pain, and I push through. I don't do meds unless I absolutely have to. I have one prescription that I take, and I get it filled at the first of the year, and when it comes time to fill it again, it's usually a year later, and I have to get the doctor to approve it again, even though she gives me like 3 refills every time, but I never use them, but there are times that we have to. Change of seasons really affect me. Cold to warm, warm to cold, storms coming through, that old bursitis saying you always heard your parents and grandparents. Yeah, I live it every day now. But I hope I can be an example. Feel free to reach out to me. Um, like I say, my foundation is Jeff Giving a Hand. I'll help. We're a small organization hoping to grow. If you have some funds that you can put our way, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We'd love the help. You can find us at jeffgivingahand.org. Jeff Solberg Facebook, Jeff Giving a Hand Facebook, Jeff Giving a Hand Instacare, Jeff Solberg Instacare. I'm in Utah and I live life and like helping people, and our goal going forward is getting out, doing different activities all the time, from hiking, kayaking, motorcycle. I still ride a motorcycle, but I'm reaching out now to make some modifications to make that motorcycle ride safer and easier for me. But again, I thank you for listening. If you have any comments, send them to me. You can reach me at jeffgivingahand@gmail.com. And I love you and God bless you. Thank you.